Dear colleagues and friends, good morning, good afternoon, and good evening, wherever you are. Welcome to the first private sector working group meeting of the Article 6 Implementation Partnership, A6IP. My name is Hayato Nakamura, a team member of the A6IP Center. It is my great pleasure to be today's MC. A year has passed since the A6IP Center was established to manage this partnership. So far, we have conducted the A6IP working groups focusing on capacity building and its tools, namely authorization, reporting, and tracking. And we have mostly targeted the capacity building of countries or central government. Meanwhile, along with the development of the network of partnerships, we granted a lot of participation from the peoples from private sector. Besides, in implementing Article 6, mobilizing the private sector into the actual mitigation activities can be one of the important factors and milestones for the parties. Therefore, together with our strategic partner in the private sector, IETA, the A6IP Center has decided to launch this private sector working group in this partnership. Let me explain today's program. After the opening remarks, we request the A6IP Center to explain the background of this private sector working group. After Q&A and comments from the floor, we will take a bit of poll to see the background of the participants. Then we will have a panel discussion by inviting major players and practitioners to discuss the ongoing works toward the high integrity of carbon markets. We will conduct today's meeting by discussing a bit about the future arrangement of this working group as well. I also have a housekeeping announcement. For the questions to the presenters and panelists, we will use the Q&A window in the Zoom platform. If you find similar questions or comments, you may click like this. And the question that gathered more likes will be prioritized in case there's a time constraint. Besides, I would like to note that the session of today is recorded and uploaded to the webpage of A6IP later on. The presentation materials that are to be used today are already available online. The link will be posted in the chat box later on. Without further ado, I would like to invite Mr. Andrea Mozzani, International Policy Director of IETA, for the opening remarks. The floor is yours.
Thank you, Nakamura-san. Thank you. Good evening, good afternoon, or good morning, wherever you're joining from. It's a pleasure to see so many of you, friends and colleagues, online on Friday from all over the world. Most of you, I assume, know IETA very well as the trusted business voice on carbon market and emissions trading around the world. We were founded in 1999, and we are about to celebrate our 25th birthday next month. And we now have over 320 members from different sectors committed to supporting the expansion of high integrity carbon markets, including compliance emission trading systems, the voluntary carbon market, and of course, Article 6 cooperative approaches. We are therefore delighted to be here today with IGES to co-host the first meeting of the private sector working group of A6IP, and we thank IGES for their consideration, for their decision to involve IETA and the private sector in their efforts to build capacity on Article 6. I will now hand over to my colleague, Bjorn von Dam, who is International Policy Advisor based in Singapore, who will provide some scene-setting remarks to this session. Thank you, and I'll see you later.
Thank you, Andrea, and thank you to all participants for being here for this very special occasion. I think this is a special occasion because we know that whilst implementation of Article 6 has already started, with more than 50 bilateral agreements signed and the first transactions of ITMOs already moving ahead, the pace is still much too slow to address the climate crisis, to limit warming below 1.5 degrees Celsius, and to meet the targets of the Paris Agreement. Because we know that Article 6, both 6.2 and 6.4, can help us increase climate ambition, can help us deliver finance towards mitigation activities where they are most cost-effective, and support emerging economies as well as private sector industries in their transition towards a more sustainable economy. We also know from the global stocktake at COP28 in Dubai last year that parties' NDC ambitions are still far off track. And we know from this year's discussion around the new collective quantified goal on climate finance, or NCQG, that market mechanisms and Article 6 will not just be helpful, but indispensable for us to reach net zero before 2050. Still, we also know that countries and companies alike are struggling to understand the opportunities that exist and how they can leverage Article 6 to meet their targets. Questions around changes and revocations of authorizations, around the application of corresponding adjustments, around the transfer of ITMOs between registries, around the secondary trading of eligible units, the transition of CDM projects, methodologies, removals, and the timeline for the Article 6.4 mechanism to become fully operational are still not resolved or not well understood by market participants, leading to delays and misunderstandings in its implementation. So through AITA, we are working proactively on these issues with our members, of course, through our regular working groups in various countries, through the Business Partnership for Market Implementation, through our policy input and submissions, our modeling work with the University of Maryland, and our participation as observers in the official negotiations, including in the coming weeks at SB60 in Bonn. And we are now, as Andrea mentioned, delighted to continue our strong collaboration with the Article 6 Implementation Partnership to set up this private sector working group to hopefully help resolve and unravel some of these remaining questions, to create a common and shared understanding of the challenges and opportunities ahead, and ultimately to scale and speed up the implementation for the benefit of our climate. So we very much look forward to working with all the partners present and jointly developing our program as we move ahead to deliver results that can be helpful for everyone. But for now, we have a very exciting agenda ahead of us. So I would like to conclude and hand it back to you, Nakamura-san. And thank you very much.
Thank you very much, AITA colleagues. So having the remarks in mind, I would like to proceed to the first session of the meeting, background of private sector working group. So I would like to request Mr. Kazu Kwakutsu, Director of HXIP Center, for his presentation. A reminder for the audience, by the way, if you have a question about the presentation, grateful if you kindly write in the Q&A box. Thank you very much. So Director Kazu, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Nakamura-san, and also welcome to all the participants for today's first private sector working group, and also very much appreciate our cooperation with AITA from Andrea Bjorn, which I completely agree with you both. That really private sector involvement is crucial and essential elements of Article 6. We really need more finance, investment, and more technology transfer, which I think a private sector will play a very important role to play. And without private sector, I think only government can solve issues. So I really welcome these opportunities, and also looking forward to have a very substantive discussions in this working group, which today's distinguished panelists could also provide a very important insights into what is actually going on the ground level, which is actually really needed to really progress and also scale up our climate actions. So I mean, not going to all these introduction, but I just wanted to also give you some basic background where we are coming from in terms of this high integrity carbon market discussions, and also wanted to give at least our intention in terms of our expectations, how we proceed this working group. So again, my name is Kazu, from director of this Paris Agreement Article 6 Implementation Partnership Center. Maybe many of you already know that now we have 78 countries being part of this partnership. They all are interested in implementing Article 6. And also we have more than 100 institutions, including the many UN and the multilateral banks, and also many private sector is joining this partnership. They are all interested in these market opportunities and also wanted to understand more about how this Article 6 can also benefit to them. So we try to enhance more partnership to make this Article 6 and also overall objective of high integrity carbon market to work. So for this purpose, as was just mentioned by Nakamura-san in the first openings, that we have started the support for the government, particularly around Article 6 rules on authorization, reporting, tracking. But at the same time, this involvement of private sector, particularly around the voluntary carbon market, and also many initiatives is going on. We try to also support the facilitating more interactions and also in-depth discussions. So I first wanted to start just to explain about the high integrity carbon market. So next slide, please. So the first slide just to show this principle of high integrity carbon market. Actually, this term, high integrity carbon market, started from the 2020, which was started from the UK's presidency in G7, where this the word high integrity carbon market was also mentioned. That was also they mentioned again in the German presidency in G7. And the last year, under the presidencies of Japan, we also tried to make it more a little bit elaborate in terms of what do we mean by high integrity carbon market, and call it as a principle of high integrity carbon market. And also this was agreed among G7 communique, and also we have adopted this principle. There are basically three important components, which is the integrity of the supply side integrity, and also demand side integrity and market side integrity. So we consider these kind of three elements, the supply of the credit, as well as those who are using the credit, needs to have a more integrity in terms of how that could be achieved towards net zero by 2050. I think one of the important points of this high integrity principle is that we would kind of make shift towards using this carbon market in a way to achieve net zero by 2050. So net zero by 2050 or even more earlier. I think for this purpose, I think the market will really try to align with the ultimate objective net zero by 2050. And this market also needs to provide more transparency and information disclosure, and more information, especially related to the registry. I think those are the things that we also consider that is important for the integrity. So we kind of put those three integrity. So next slide, please. Just to point to some of the important elements on the principle. And of course, the important discussion is how we can make this principle into the on-ground work, and how the engagement of the private sector or even initiative could work on this. But for the supply side, as I mentioned, especially the emission reductions and then even including removals, should align the 1.5 degree goals and achievement net zero emissions by 2050. That's a very important kind of a distinction in terms of how this credit will be, make a reductions and claims. And also, there's the alignment on Article 6 rules, and also the COSIA eligible unit criteria that was also mentioned. So the alignment with those international rules could be also suggested as a one-of principle. And also another important elements, such as the more environmental social impacts, including the human rights respectation and gender consideration, and also right of indigenous peoples. I think those we need to ensure that those rights and benefits are ensured in terms of emission reductions and removal that is behind those projects. And in terms of the demand side, which is more like how the credit will be used, more like a user side. First, this principle mentioned about this credit will be used only for those which are unavoidable emissions. So of course, the first priority is to reduce by ourselves, our own actions by ourselves. But at the same time, we also see there is a certain emission that is unavoidable. So those credit, international credit will be also used towards that. And also needs to be ensured that the 1.5 degrees goals and Paris alignment. And also when it is used towards NDC or used towards other international purposes such as COSIA, it needs to be aligned in Article 6 rule. So this is more like when it is used towards those purposes, alignment needs to be made. And also these kind of the use of the credit should be more widely disclosed by those who are using it, for what kind of purposes, and then it also needs to kind of encourage where those investments are occurred in a way to encourage more new emission reductions, more new investment to what is really needed. So I think we also consider like a demand side could also play a very important role in facilitating this high integrity. The last part for this, the market integrity is basically we really need to create more transparency around those supply side integrity as well as demand side, and how those credits will be identified or understood through the information from the registry, or maybe some kind of information dashboard, which can provide more detailed information in a more consolidated way, so that market participant can be more confident in using or providing or even acquiring those credits. So we see that this market integrity is also a crucial part of it. So basically, D7 principle identifies those other important elements of the integrity. So next slide, please. And also, this is just a recent communique from G7. This year is a presidency in Italy. They also mentioned about this principle of high integrity in carbon market as a way to more sharing experiences in promoting the implementation of this principle. So we have adopted this principle last year. So what is really needed is to really understand how this principle could be implemented in the different contexts in different countries, and how we can share such experience to really promote or more even upscale. And then also communique also mentioned about this Article 6 implementation partnership as a important platform for capacity building. So we all know that we need to understand more better about this kind of opportunities, but also work together to really enhance our capacity to really implement. So just wanted to mention that this was also mentioned in G7 Italy, and we really wanted to commit to implementing this principle. So next slide, please. So for this, what we are currently thinking in terms of from the principle to the implementation, we are also thinking to working with the actual stakeholders or those who are promoting the initiatives. So we are now, for example, including those panelists today, ICVCM, for example, and also VCMI, and also other independent standards such as Gold Standard and BERA, and also the country government to work together to really pilot test how this principle could be implemented through using some of the initiatives, and also encourage more private sector to join. And we can also support pilot testing, and also we can test to see how it works, and if there are the issues, how we can overcome them. So we wanted to cover all these three elements throughout this year's work. So private sector working group is also used to share such experience and also identify some issues. So next slide, please. So maybe I already touched upon this one. So basically, this working group is just to use in a way to, first of all, to share the experience and some of the good practices, which we can also replicate. And also, we may use this as a way to identify some issues and then discuss how we can also tackle them to really overcome. So, of course, this idea of high integrity is still kind of broad term. And I think it really needs to be implemented. And we understand there are different contexts, how it can be implemented. So we really wanted to use this as a platform for our sharing of experiences and also discuss how we can expand it in a more broader context. So we really appreciate AITA to be part of this. And I'm sure that AITA can provide a lot of insights and then also facilitate this process. But at the same time, we also invite all the partners, of course, including those private sector, but also today we have many participants from government and also other international institutions and maybe also including research institutions to really get together to work. In the end of the day, this is not just only private, but also more collective efforts. So these our working group will be recorded and then shared. Of course, some of the participants or partners may not be able to join timely. So we wanted to also share this among a more broader audience. So that's that's my introduction. And again, today is the first time, so it is starting from the experience of the all the initiatives. But next time, we really wanted to be more in depth in terms of how we can see this working group to be more forward. But thank you very much. Looking forward to today's discussion. And back to Nakamura-san.
Thank you, Director Kazu, for the presentation. For the a bit of note, I have said like today's presentation is already online, but the webinar chat said like there's no, and actually will be the next week. So that just I would like to correct my remarks before, so that it's the next week. And just wait for the moment together with this record, so that everyone can join the discussion. Okay, I don't see any questions at the question box, but if there's any questions, so that later on, so that we can also entertain the question and answer, so that I would like to proceed further. So that before proceeding to the panel discussion, so that we would like to take a bit of poll by using this Zoom platform. So that I would like to invite Mr. Andrea Bozzani to moderate the poll session and then panel discussion. So that Andrea, you have the floor.
Thank you again, Nakamura-san. As you said, we're gonna break the ice with the audience, asking 4 simple questions to take the pulse of the participants in this meeting and provide some food for thought for the following panel discussions. So I'm going to ask Ijas to launch the first poll, please. So, oh, it's 4 questions all at the same time. What is your affiliation? How would you rate your knowledge of Article 6 from 1, little or no knowledge, to 5, very much familiar? Are you, your company, planning to develop or procure Article 6 authorized credits this year or next year? Do you think existing Article 6 authorization are robust enough for buyers and investors? And we have yes, very, yes, somewhat robust, no, not robust, or don't know. And then the last question, do you think ongoing negotiations are hindering Article 6.2 implementation? And again, from strongly agree to strongly disagree. So I'm going to give you a few seconds to vote. And then I hope to see the results of these polls on screen. And all our panelists can see them too soon. So we can comment on them during the discussion. Okay, so audience from participants from the private sector are just over half. We have a significant representation from the public sector, both at national and subnational level and at the international level. And then we have still 15% of participants from NGOs or academia. I think we're doing well in terms of knowledge of Article 6. Over a third of participants say they're very much familiar with Article 6. And almost half are actively involved in Article 6.2 projects, leading to authorized credits this year or next year. Also, relatively strong level of confidence on existing Article 6 authorizations. And finally, probably a strong signal from this audience to Article 6 negotiators that will meet soon in Bonn for SB60. I think we're almost 60% of participants believe ongoing negotiations, the rule book that has not been fully completed, either strongly or somewhat hinders ongoing Article 6.2 implementation, even though, as we will discuss, there are projects that are developing credits, authorized credits, and some transactions are being concluded. Thank you. This was interesting food for thought. So I will move on and introduce the panelists who will be with us. So we should have Anton Tsvetov, who's Associate Director for Policy at ICVCM, the Integrity Council for the Voluntary Carbon Market. Bianca Gichangi, who's Regional Lead for Africa at VCMI. Robin Green, Head of Partnerships at Carbon Place. Christy Majorkirk, and I hope you pronounce your name correctly, Managing Director at ART, the crediting mechanism for jurisdictional RED Plus credits. And last but not least, Svenja Telle, who's Origination Director at Base Carbon. So I see you all on screen. Thank you so much for being here. It's great to have such a diverse panel of speakers, diverse in all sense. I'm going to start with the same question for speakers representative integrity initiatives. So I'm going to start with Anton, then go to Bianca and then Robin. And I'd like you to take a few minutes to describe the role your organization has in fostering high integrity carbon markets based on what we heard from Director Kazu. So what are you doing and what can we expect in the near future? So we start with Anton. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Andrea, and it's a pleasure to be here, and thank you to IGS and the Article 6 Implementation Partnership for convening this. It's a really exciting time to be discussing high integrity carbon markets, and we at the ICVCM see ourselves as being at the center of this on the supply side. In the three elements that Kazu-san so eloquently presented to us, supply, demand, and market. So what the ICVCM is doing, the Integrity Council for the Volatile Carbon Market, is we're trying to bring a threshold of quality to the market, and essentially providing a framework that will allow buyers and investors to understand what quality means on the supply side in carbon markets. Through a robust consultation process, we have developed the 10 core carbon principles and an assessment framework that operationalizes those principles. And we are now in the process of assessing carbon crediting programs and carbon crediting methodologies. We bundle them together and call them categories. And the aim is to really bring a CCP label to the market and allow the market to understand what quality means. We see ourselves as enjoying a lot of support from the market, and the market is really rallying around these sets of principles. We have had programs representing 98% of the market applying for the label, and this is also important to us. An important signal of trust and support is that we cannot assess programs if they don't apply. So it has to come, really, the initiative has to come from them. And we're now using our rulebook to assess that. We have announced decisions for the first 5 carbon crediting programs. And the way the assessment process operates is that it's what we call a double tick process. So in order to have a CCP label credit in the market, we have to have a carbon crediting program that is CCP eligible, and it has to issue credits under a CCP eligible methodology. So on the first track of that, we have had several approval decisions already, and there are programs in the market right now that are CCP eligible. So we're now waiting for the second step to introduce these carbon crediting methodologies that will be labeled as CCP eligible, and then the label will arrive to the market. And what we hope this will do is that it will rally demand in the market around these types of credits. It will increase trust in the market. It will allow demand to grow, and eventually, for the market to scale up to the size that we need in order to deliver both the mitigation potential and the finance that is needed in the developing world. And I'm happy to continue these discussions and maybe focus more on our role in the with regards to Article 6 and to government policy and regulation in the future. So happy to be here, and would be really happy to continue these discussions. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Anton. Indeed, let's, if you're brief, we can have another round to discuss more specifically the implications of your work on Article 6. But now I'm going to go to Bianca. As I said, same question. What is VCMI doing to foster high integrity carbon markets?
Thank you, Andrea, and thank you to the Article 6 Implementation Partnership and IETA for inviting me today. For those of you who are not familiar with VCMI, our work centers around enabling high integrity voluntary carbon market activities that deliver on the 1.5-degree goal, bringing benefits for climate, people, and nature. And we do this on the demand side through our Claims Code of Practice, which enables companies to make carbon integrity claims, recognizing their commitment going above and beyond their science-aligned emission cuts in their decarbonization efforts to accelerate toward global net zero. This means that companies use carbon credits in addition to and not instead of decarbonization to make these credible claims. And these guidelines often emphasize on transparency and accountability. So our claims code is leading in this guidance and incorporates other standards such as ICVCM. We work very closely with them, the Greenhouse Gas Protocol, and CDP. The claims made are also verified using the VCMI Monitoring, Reporting, and Assurance Framework, which outlines specific reporting and assurance criteria that companies need to meet. And we have a silver, gold, and platinum claims categories, recognizing the increasing levels of climate action. And having a carbon integrity claim makes an organization stand out as it communicates climate leadership, and that the corporate is taking authentic commitment to bettering the planet. So the claims code was also established through a global multi-stakeholder collaborative process over an 18-month period. And that's on the demand side where we work on high integrity, but we also do work on the supply side through our access strategy program. And what this does is support host countries to access high integrity VCMs in their carbon market frameworks complementary to Article 6 and compliance markets. And what this does is facilitate the achievement of their NDCs and Paris goals, and for a lot of this emerging and developing countries, their sustainable development goals that contribute to their green growth. So this access, the output of the first of the program was the Access Strategy Toolkit, which actually provides guidance to help countries incorporate the high integrity VCMs. And we've done a practical case with the state of Yucatan, where we did a strategy for them. And now they want to go even further. So they've requested we do a best practice guide for their private sector to get involved in carbon market activities. The other form of support that the Access Strategy program gives is through secondment. I, for one, have just completed one with the government of Kenya, where I was working directly on the policy development on carbon markets based at the Office of the President. And those regulations were actually released this week, and they do incorporate voluntary carbon market activities. The country recognizes their value in complement to the Article 6 activities. So we've also done studies with climate focus on agriculture and blue economy opportunities for Latin America. So this program continues to support additional outputs and catalytic projects and partnerships that can help countries to promote promote high quality market activities, and overall with demand and supply to promote equitable market access. Thank you very much, Andrea.
Thank you, Bianca. Very clear overview. And I'm now going to Robin for Carbon Place. So can you please run us through what Carbon Place is doing to foster high integrity in carbon markets?
Great, thanks, Andrea. And it's so great to be on this call. So let me give you a bit of background on Carbon Place. So Carbon Place is set up by 9 banks to bring robust integrity and bank standard infrastructure to the market. And what does that mean? Well, Carbon Place works closely with major registries in the market. Carbon Place works with those registries to allow our customers to hold credits from those registries in our accounts. With full audit and transparency. It allows our customers, maybe buyers, to view and purchase credits issued through any of the registries which we are connected to. Now, why is this interesting? Well, this is interesting to registries, not just the major registries, the ones we've all heard of, but those registries that are setting up, maybe national registries, maybe regional registries. We allow our buyers, give them direct access into those registries. So connecting into Carbon Place will give you access to the Carbon Place network of purchasers, and we can facilitate very clear and transparent transactional transfers of ownership between the producers issuing into those registries and our buyers. And why is that interesting to buyers? Well, if you're a buyer, if you're a corporate, if you're a nation state looking to purchase credits, again, joining the robust Carbon Place network gives you access to all those registries that we're connected to. Again, the major registries, we have either agreements signed or close to being signed with the major registries that you will have heard of. And we're also talking through linking Carbon Place to, as I say, some of the national and regional registries. So as a buyer, you don't necessarily have to open accounts and build relationships with those registries. You can actually transact, you can take delivery, and through the legal structures that we have in place, you can take delivery, hold in your own name those credits. So when we're talking about sort of market infrastructure, market integrity, we have this really clear transfer of ownership from all the way from producer all the way from to the buyer, as I say, under this robust infrastructure. It allows for clear reporting, both of transfer, ownership, and retirement, all the way from producer to buyer. And the credit doesn't need to get transferred between registries. It doesn't need to get rebooked. It stays in the issuing registry. The producing nation has full views and still, transparency over that credit. So from that perspective, really we feel adding significant integrity. But as I say, working really closely with the participants. So we see ourselves as sort of an enabling infrastructure, not looking to necessarily replace any of the infrastructure that's there already. We're just looking to link it up, efficiently. When it comes to what is the quality of the credits, well, you've heard some great testimony from the ICVCM there. We link in with many data providers. You will have heard of the ratings agencies, some pricing providers. So as a user of Carbon-Place, not only can you see the credits that you may have purchased from a number of different registries in one place, and you can manage them through that one place, but you can also see the ratings coming from other high integrity providers in this market. So as a user of our platform, you can see the quality of what you've bought. You can potentially assess the quality of what you might want to buy. So there's another piece there where really the integrity of the quality surfaced. Carbon-Place doesn't actually have a view on that quality, but we are openly surface the quality that's assessed by those who are best placed to do so. And finally, on the transactional side, because of our relationships with the registries and the structures we have in place, we can perform a really robust delivery versus payment across from supplier to buyer, and again, just ensuring that the credits transfer and the cash transfers, and making sure that the counterparties are made good. So I'll pause now, but I hope that's given some indications around what Carbon-Place is doing to increase the market integrity in the VCM.
Thank you, Robin. Thanks. I'm sure we can go back to some of your points in the Q&A. I see questions are starting to come in. But now I'm going to move to the next two panelists, who are people, institutions with direct experience in the generation or the procurement of authorized credits. So I'm going to ask Kristi and Svenja to share what their experience has been in being front runners in Article 6. What are the lessons learned, and what are the challenges that they faced, and what can be done about these challenges? So I'm gonna ask Kristi to take the floor, and then Svenja.
Thanks so much. Hello, everybody. I feel like that lead-in is setting me up, that I have all the answers to everything. So just to be clear, I'm happy to share our experiences, but we haven't solved all of the world's problems quite yet. But thank you for including us on this panel. We're really excited to be here. As mentioned, my name is Kristi Major-Kurth. Andrea, you pronounced it perfectly, so thank you. And I am the Managing Director for the Architecture for REDD+ Transactions, or ART. As mentioned, we are a jurisdictional REDD+ crediting program focused on reducing tropical deforestation and degradation. As you could probably guess from that scale, we only credit governments at the national and large subnational level. We felt this was important for achieving results at scale. Our experience with moving towards Article 6 actions really started from the start of our program. So we designed our program to be Paris aligned as much as possible. It doesn't mean we're identical to all of the UN decisions, but we really wanted to ensure that we were aligned and we could support governments working towards their Paris commitments, up to and including using the Cancun safeguards to ensure that we were reflecting the internationally agreed upon safeguards for our program. So one of the first steps that we took more officially was seeking ICAO approval to provide eligible credits under CORSIA. For those that may not be as familiar with the requirements under that, I do want to just touch briefly on that so you can understand the scope of what's required. A number of crediting programs, including ART and our sister program, ACR, were approved to supply 2016 through 2020 vintage credits for the 2021 through 2023 voluntary phase for ICAO. To date, only ART and ACR are approved to supply post-2020 vintage credits for both the 2021 through 2022 phase and the first phase of 2024 through 2026. We're very proud and excited to be able to offer this. Really, the difference is that post-2020 vintages have additional requirements to comply with the Paris Agreement, and we were approved based on our program rules and our registry infrastructure that avoids double counting. So all of the crediting approaches in ART standard, which we call trees. Sometimes you might hear us called ART trees, but trees is the standard and ART is the program. But all three of our crediting approaches under trees are approved to supply CORSIA, and we'll talk through some of the other requirements. Really, there's two primary requirements for credits to be labeled as CORSIA eligible. First, host countries must have a letter of authorization that explicitly authorizes the use of offset credits by airlines for CORSIA, and they must commit to report the authorization to the UNFCCC and make corresponding adjustments so that any credits used by airlines are not also counted toward the host country NDC achievement. We make the letters of authorization public available on our registry as well. Secondly, to avoid any buyer liability, there must be an approved compensation mechanism in place to compensate for, replace, or reconcile instances of units being used under CORSIA, but also claimed by the host country towards their NDC achievement. So in essence, if the country has authorized the units but doesn't actually make the corresponding adjustment, there must be a compensation mechanism in place. They can do this in one of two ways. So they could actually report the corresponding adjustment, in which case you don't need compensation because they've actually reported and made the corresponding adjustment in line with the UNFCCC Article 6 rules. Or they can provide us with a legally secure and binding guarantee that any double claimed units that a corresponding adjustment has not been made for will be replaced. There are a ton of additional details and annual reporting requirements and things like that, which if anybody ever wants to get into, they are in our appendix of trees, and then also happy to talk shop anytime people want to, but for purposes of being brief, I'll skip some of those details. The next step really in our journey was the government of Guyana contacting us and saying that they really wanted to issue CORSIA eligible credits for post-2020. For them, it was their 2021 trees credits that they wished to be eligible for, and working with them to understand what they were reporting, how they were reporting it, and what the requirements were around doing so. They wanted to use the first compensation mechanism. They wanted to actually report the corresponding adjustments and not need a different compensation mechanism. So in order to do that, they reported a tremendous number of different pieces of information to the UNFCCC. So they had 5 big things that they had to send in. So the first was their national institutional arrangement for the issuance of correspondingly adjusted carbon credits, which included who the designated authority domestically was that could issue the letters of authorization. They had to submit the actual letter of authorization that I mentioned. They had to submit a biennial report, including the RED Plus technical annex. And then they had to submit 2 of the electronic format reports. So the initial report and then their annual report that actually showed the corresponding adjustment. So I know the government of Guyana is always happy to talk to other governments on, how they did that and what and share their process domestically for deciding who was the designated authority and how to report these things. From ART's perspective, we confirmed that these were all the pieces that were needed from the various Article 6 decisions, and that they had indeed reported everything appropriately. And then we were able to label their trees credits as CORSIA eligible. As you might imagine, we were super excited to be able to support them in this process and to have the registry functionality that had all the appropriate checkboxes so everything could be tracked and very transparently labeled. As far as lessons learned, and I think we'll talk about challenges in a little bit more, so I'll just focus on the lesson learned. So the lesson learned was we learned a lot about various Article 6 decisions and what was necessary to submit, but I think the biggest lesson learned is that it can actually be done. Following the last COP, I think there was a general error of the negotiations didn't make as much progress as people had hoped, and so it was all a failure and we couldn't move forward with anything for Article 6. And I think this shows that that's not true. as much progress probably wasn't made as we would have all wanted. And there's still a lot of work to be done, but countries can move forward and make corresponding adjustments. And there is all the pieces of the reporting framework necessary for them to start doing this work. This is going to be huge. It's an exciting moment to see that some of these mechanisms can start being used and to move that process forward. So I'll pause there because I'm sure there's many questions and other things we can talk about, but that's our journey. And so we're excited to be at this moment.
Thank you, Christy. Indeed, very exciting. Thank you very much for the overview. And now moving to Svenja. Similar question. You've been engaged in Article 6 transaction from different perspective than Christy, but what were the challenging phase? What lessons did you learn? What would you share with Article 6 AP? Thank you.
Yeah, thank you for having me. It's really exciting to be part of this kickoff meeting of this really important work stream. A little bit about myself. I'm Svenja Telli. I'm Director of Origination for Base Carbon. Base Carbon is a specialty financier into carbon projects. It's a publicly traded entity in Canada, and with a portfolio that spans across nature-based reductions and removal credits projects in Asian and African countries. And to dive a little bit deeper into my experience over the last year or so in terms of generating and procuring Article 6 authorized credits, which is, as we all know, a very rare experience to be part of a project and a financier process behind the scenes. Yeah, a little bit about the background of the project and how it worked to generate and procure the credits. So the authorization was announced in April this year, where Base Carbon received an initial transfer of around 700,000 credits that were correspondingly adjusted from an investment that we had placed 2 years before in Rwanda. It's a cookstove project that was developed by the project developer Del Aqua, and each of the credits were designated to be Article 6 authorized by Verra. So I can also share the project ID. You can, we are a publicly traded entity, so everything we do is pretty transparent and publicly available, which in itself, I always point people towards the fact it's a very rare, I think, learning occasion that the transaction details are way more accessible and available than in many other companies that are investing. So it was a cookstove project, and in fact, it was the first ever correspondingly adjusted Article 6 authorized carbon credits on Verra, on the Verra registry. The ID is 4150, so you can look it up on the registry. And it's a household device project under the methodology 0006, the household device project methodology under Verra. And in terms of the procurement of the corresponding adjustments, so the contractual background of the transaction, it was a bilateral letter of authorization between the project developer and the government of Rwanda, which was negotiated throughout 2023. And the credits are eligible for Article 6.4. So this is not an Article 6.2 transaction. And I think what's interesting, as Andrea, to the second point of your question, what are the deep lessons learned? Some of them very painful. I think everyone who's been part of corresponding adjustment negotiations has their own story to tell. But I would say the main points is really that bilateral agreements are still overshadowed by some sort of policy uncertainty. I mean, we are still faced with the fact that Article 6 is not operational under UNFCCC yet, which can lead to unpredictable changes of the terms of the agreement. Since it's a bilaterally negotiated agreement between the host government and the project developer. And this, from an investment perspective, like me wearing the investor hat, can make it difficult, to plan and make investment decisions based on regulatory uncertainty around the eligibility of authorization letters at this point. The CAs, or their authorization letters, also change the project economics. I'm gonna give a few numbers. Again, none of this is secret. All of this is public. So because the project, the carbon credits, got CA labels, 2% of any of the issued Article 6 credits had to be, or have to be, immediately retired for global climate change mitigation efforts. 10% of the credits are to be transferred to the government of Rwanda for achieving their national NDC, for the NDCs, and 5% of the net revenues from the sale of the remaining Article 6 authorized credits are going to the United Nations Global Adaptation Fund. So you can really see that the CA labels create a lot of economic upside in the project, but it also is it's leading to a haircut on a downside. So that's something that we as investors, and I think everyone around the table, just needs to be transparent around, that this is something that can happen. Another lesson is that the buyer groups change, and I've been part of seeing and witnessing that change, while we saw over the last years really strong interest from specifically for that methodology out of the Middle East for auctions that we've seen over the last 2 years. So given that the price point changes with corresponding adjustments, the buyer group has changed from my experience, specifically for this project, especially when it comes to large volumes. And what's also interesting is we are generally already dealing with low price transparency at the moment, OTC transactions. In this case, it's very interesting because it's the first of a kind. So how do you price 700 something thousand credits that have suddenly a CA label? So CORSIA eligible or CORSIA aligned, which puts another notch on, like, sort of price premium, but also uncertainty on the credits. So that is another steep learning curve, how to price them, what's sort of their risk adjusted deduction for the credits, given that Article 6 is not operational and this is a bilateral contract. So in terms of, challenges, but also opportunities, and what I've learned is, I think transactions like this are a really good opportunity for creating mechanisms in the market that allow for risk transfer, specifically for the insurance sector to step in. MIGA has been working on political risk insurance for CA transactions and Article 6 transactions. So I can only really push for that. It's very, very helpful for the investment side if we are able to underwrite the risk, the political risk of these transactions, especially in terms of if CAs can be revoked or any other political risk that can happen. And then finally, the last lesson that I've personally witnessed is that a lot of these negotiations, given that they are currently bilateral in these projects, is that there is not much transparency, there is not much comparison in terms of the haircut that happened to the project. How can we compare that to other projects in the market? We can't, because it's very, very few, it's very early on. So it's as a stakeholder and a shareholder in the project, I can really push for more streamlined negotiation guidelines around the origination and around the procurement of these projects. That's it for me for now.
Thank you very much, Svenja. Thanks for sharing all these insights from your direct experience. Just maybe if I can come back on a couple of points. One is regarding the haircuts that you mentioned, the 10% share to the host country and the voluntary cancellation. Just to clarify, are these requirements in Rwandan legislation where they negotiated bilaterally between the project developer and the government? Because just to clarify, for Article 6.2 transactions, so credits issued by independent standards, like in this case, it is not a requirement according to UN guidance. So it's either voluntary or mandated at national level. What was what happened in your case?
I can only speak with certainty about this project. So I would look into, Article 6.2 guidelines, if existing, of Rwanda, but those are the project conditions. I can't say with certainty if that applies to every single transaction in Rwanda or if it was bilaterally negotiated for these project terms.
Okay, thanks. And then one further point for clarification, you did mention these are transactions on 6.4. What did you mean by that? Because I thought when I think about 0.4, I think about the credit mechanism that will hopefully be operational soon, and not about credits generated by Vera, like in this case. So can you elaborate on that?
Yeah, so the credits are intended to be sold into commodity market, like trading houses. It's not going to be a bilateral transaction between Rwanda and another country. It's intended to go through trading houses.
Okay, thanks. I see questions coming in. There are at least 3 questions for Christy. Trees. Maybe one point clarification. I think it's touched on at least 2 questions. It's about your process to ensure there's more counting. One question seems to assume that the credits sold for CORSIA are also counted towards the host country's NDC. So is that the case? Can you clarify this point?
Sure. So credits sold that are CORSIA eligible. So again, to be clear, they could be used by airlines, or we're seeing, other private sector buyers wanting CORSIA eligible credits, even if they're not an airline. But CORSIA eligible credits can't both be used for a host country's NDC as well as an end user. So that's what I was talking about, that they have to make the corresponding adjustments. For us, it's the national governments must make the corresponding adjustments. We require, before we will label them as CORSIA eligible, that they either actually report the corresponding adjustments. And to another question in the chat, so we understand that requires both the BTR and the agreed electronic format reporting. So all those pieces that I mentioned that Guyana had done, it's our understanding you need all of those to report the corresponding adjustment. So they either have to actually make the corresponding adjustment, or if they don't, they need to give us a legally binding guarantee of a compensation mechanism. So the idea behind the compensation mechanism is that it is a tool that they could use. So if they do default and they don't make the corresponding adjustment, that there is a way to replace or compensate for the cost of replacing those credits. So any guarantee would need to be offered through a reputable third party. So, a sovereign or a corporate with a high grade or prime rating, I guess, but like Moody's or S&P or something like that, and have sufficient remedies that we can guarantee that it would cover the cost for replacement units. As the standard, our job is to check. They have within a year of when the adjustment was due to make and report everything to the UNFCCC. And if they don't, then we invoke the compensation mechanism and we'll make that full. So we also, as you might imagine, have a lot of reporting requirements to the UNFCCC and ICAO on the status of when those are made and how the compensation mechanisms are used. It should also be noted that we, as the standard, have the ability to also say, if you default, then we don't believe you when you say you're committed to making it in the future, that we can not give them subsequent CORSIA eligibility until they've actually made the corresponding adjustment. So we have a lot of tools to really ensure that the CORSIA requirements are upheld.
Thank you. Maybe we I see another couple of questions or statements in the chat about corresponding adjustments. So maybe we stay on that. We can open the floor to the other panelists as well, because I know some of them at least have very strong knowledge of Article 6, the rule book and the negotiations. So when can we be confident that the corresponding adjustment is made? Is a letter of authorization sufficient? Is the BTR what really matters? Can the country still retract the BTR? What are your view on these points? What would you like to share with our audience? And if there are no volunteers, I'm going to go with Anton, because I know he's been a negotiator in the Article 6 room for several years.
Yes, this brings back some memories. But today I'll have to speak on behalf of the ICVCM, so I'm going to sort of try and avoid speaking on things I'm not mandated to speak on. But what I want to say on this, so for us right now, the ICVCM assessment framework does not require a corresponding adjustment. So this is something that is being discussed. And there is a deeper link, of course, between the Paris rules and the supply side integrity we're trying to bring to the market. A lot of that is in our work streams that we call the continuous improvement work programs. And we have separate discussions on Paris-aligned baselines, on corresponding adjustments, on NDC-aligned baselines. So all these, and on additional safeguards as well. So those are some elements that are crucial for aligning the integrity rules that we are bringing to the voluntary market and the Article 6 world. And we really see, I want to say that we really see a convergence there. It seems that, especially for 6.2, there is going to be at least some reliance on the existing standards in the voluntary carbon market. And we think that the integrity label that we are bringing, and we are presenting at a threshold for integrity, can be really useful for Article 6 purposes, for identifying projects to approve and to authorize, essentially. Because governments that are engaging in Article 6 will still need a reference point for credit quality. And we hope that ours is going to be useful for them in this sense. It is, of course, a bit more complicated on the 6.4 side, because as it has been mentioned here, the rules are still, they haven't stabilized yet, right? So we have elements that are more or less stable and in place, and some others that are still subject to interpretation and to further, to use a jargon word from the process, operationalization. But broadly, we see that there is some convergence in between what we understand as high integrity and what the market understands as high integrity and what is being understood as such in the 6.4 world. Thanks.
I can also add to that to make your life easier, Andrea.
Go ahead, Svenja.
It's exactly what you just said, Anton, and also tying back to your clarification question earlier, and what I said about Article 6.4, like the credits that are coming out of the project, the Rwanda project, they are not going to be traded under Article 6.2 yet. They have corresponding adjustments, but Article 6.4 is not operational. So they are being sold under the quote unquote VCM scheme or VCM market. They have the readiness of a corresponding adjustment, but no mechanism to report into. Hence, so it's that's sort of it's like the dog biting its own tail. It's like we have the credits ready with the label, but Article 6.4 is not operational. So in a way, it's an interesting product to bring to the market, given the low readiness of the mechanism itself. So that's really my take on my experience. It's an interesting product to deal with.
Thank you. Bianca, were you going to say something? Please.
Yeah, sure. Once again, so for VCMI, we require that our companies use CCP approved credits with the ICVCM. And for claims to be made, they can be made with authorized credits or not authorized credits. But what we require is the reporting on whether they are authorized or not. And the frameworks that are developed by VCMI and ICVCM, what they really do is provide a foundation in which regulators and policymakers can build on. And this can help fast track the development of new rules within their carbon market frameworks. And then it boosts market confidence, drives demand. So what would really be good in terms of we need to see more governments incorporating these standards which are robust. And then it also can contribute towards accelerating the net zero transitions, more effort, securing more investment. And that's how we see it interrelating with Article 6 as well, because we know, the longer governments stay without reaching a consensus, the more difficult it is for global reductions in emissions. And it's harder for governments and privates to actually fill this gap with the finance that's needed for to get us to net zero. So we really see that there is a role for governments to really look at these standards that we are setting. There's a prototype already being set forward. And since 6.2 already has somewhat guidance already to start, we know that it could improve, but we do have enough from COP26 to get us started, and 6.2 activities are ongoing, but this could definitely be enhanced with national regulations incorporating this best practice that's emerging from the standards out there.
Thank you,
I
Bianca.
guess I'm happy to jump in if that's okay too. So I think building on what everybody said, so completely agreed with some of the commenters that a letter of authorization is not the same as actually making a corresponding adjustment, which is why, as I said, for CORSIA eligibility, you need to either make the corresponding adjustment or offer this compensation mechanism, because you can not do what you said you were going to do, and that's always a risk. So we make sure that you have that ability. As far as the transparency, so I can't speak to other standards, but in the art registry, there are actually two separate boxes around this. So, there is one indicating whether the credits have a letter of authorization and, the compensation mechanism and are CORSIA eligible that way. But then there is a separate specific field that says the corresponding adjustment has actually been made. And so we do actually track those separately to ensure that it's very transparent when there's a promise to do the corresponding adjustment or when it's actually been made. To Bianca's point, I really completely agree. And I hope that as the UNFCCC moves forward, both on additional details around 6.2 and certainly as they stand up 6.4, that they look to a lot of the work that the standards have done, the different organizations have done to ensure high integrity, and we don't start over. I think there's so much, everything can keep improving, not saying that is not true, but I think there is a lot of information already out there on what has worked, what is possible, build on systems that already exist. The world doesn't have, 20 years to start over and get things going. So we really hope that they'll look to that, because I think I'm dating myself, but I've been doing carbon for 2 decades now. And at one point it's true that, voluntary efforts might have been completely different than quote unquote compliance efforts, but I don't think we're there yet. I don't think that there's anybody who wants to spend money that is not insisting on the same social and environmental integrity, regardless of what claim they're going to make for it, right? People want high quality, which is why ICVCM, VCMI, and all these other groups are there and working on these issues. So I really hope that we can move in that direction where, trees credits are recognized for being able to be used for a lot of different purposes, but we don't have different rules, right? If you want to use them for a social responsibility claim, that's great. But those credits are exactly the same as one that is CORSIA eligible, right? There's no difference in the underlying unit per se. So I think the market has definitely evolved and we're really moving in that higher integrity direction. So I'm excited, and I hope that as the UNFCCC works on some of these issues that they can build on that.
Indeed, very good point, Christy. There is a question who received a lot of likes. It's a very difficult question, and I'm not sure if you have any lawyer on the panel, probably not, but it's about UNIDROIT, the process within the United Nations to clarify the legal nature of carbon credits. The question is about whether market can stop and scale without clarity on the legal nature. Does anyone have any comments on this point?
I can very briefly just say that, yeah, the for the UNIDROIT and the UNCITRAL process, it's really interesting. I think the issues they raise, but I think that honestly, the most important outcome of those discussions, if you look at some of the scoping work they're doing, is that there is surprisingly little legal certainty, and very few jurisdictions actually have a legal definition of the nature, legal nature of a carbon credit. And I think that as the market picks up, this will become a natural request from the market to regulators to try and look at it. But I think it's an open question to which extent this is a hindrance to the market or not. So especially with the international transactions and what happens to the nature of a credit when it crosses jurisdictional borders. So actually, I think that this will be something that regulators will start to think about more closely as the market scales. So I think it's important for the market to send a signal that it's something that is important, an important consideration. But I don't know whether there are responses from the market, whether that is and when or where that has been an issue for them. It would be interesting to hear views from the actual market players.
Okay, if there are no further comments on these questions, I'm gonna go to Robin. There's an interesting question about the need for simplicity. Specifically, this participant is astonished about the many layers of consultation, validation, credit rating, ICVCM media. How can we simplify all this, making sure real projects are financed and implemented, but at the same time maintaining high integrity? What are your thoughts on what Carbon Place can offer?
Yeah, I think we can all play our part in simplifying how the market hangs together. As I say, I think a lot of what is perceived as complexity has been put in for good reason. I think that there's good reason why we have these controls, we have these processes. We need these structures to ensure that the market, the credits being bought are high quality, they're being retired at high quality. And from our perspective, but noting that layers and layers of additional requirements start to make it look like a very complex market. And I think that's a really interesting observation. It's a good observation. It's one that we're certainly taking on board when it comes down to the sort of the transfer of those units, the ability to account for them once issued. Who owns them? Does it have a CA? Where's it been bought? Where's it been retired? How's it being accounted for? And I'm aware of other initiatives, and I think that's why this is such a great forum to have, because I know I talk to other entities who are looking at creating workflows, streamlined workflows for the origination side as well. And I think it's beholden on us all to work together. We each do the thing that we can do. So let's encourage entities to create streamlined workflows. I know the registries are working on this as well, but I know other parties are too. We'll do our bit to try and facilitate the flows of those issued credits from host nation to buyer as seamlessly as possible. Avoiding this sort of spreadsheet data entry, avoiding the cancelling in registries and rebooking in others. So that's the thing that we're trying to do. And then of course we've got the ratings agencies doing their bit as well. Validating against maybe ICVCM requirements. So I'm not sure I've answered the question, but I think the industry is very much aware of the issue, and I know there are many in the industry trying to solve it. And yeah, let's use this forum to try and do that. Let's just try and do a joined up flow from origination all the way to retirement, and just make sure it all hangs together. It's super simple for all the players, from corporates buying, host countries issuing, project developers creating, finance. We haven't really touched on finance, and that's not really a topic for today. But how do you demonstrate the levels of quality and risk management required by a large bank or other source of finance to invest in these? Can we all play our part? We all do our little bit to surface that information to the finance and then help those funds flow down. So great question, and I think let's use that as one of the objectives for this working group.
Okay, thank you very much. We are coming to the end of this panel, so I'm going to ask panelists if they have any concluding thought to share, particularly on the role that the Article 6 implementation partnership can play in fostering high integrity carbon markets, particularly with private sector players. If someone has any concluding thoughts, please go ahead.
Well, I think you just heard mine, which is let's all work together to develop some. I'm coming from an infrastructure point of view, so let's create some infrastructure that actually supports the market. Let's move away from, if there's a spreadsheet as part of the process, let's try and remove it. Let's try and build some high integrity, robust, auditable infrastructure that can facilitate this. It just makes the whole thing so much more simple and transparent from an end user's perspective. So how can the Article 6 IP help? Yeah, this is exactly the forum that can do that, and let's try and run some exercises of what good can look like.
Thanks, Bianca. So you unmuted it yourself.
Yeah, sure. I do see the A6 implementation partnership working with institutions such as ours really to harmonize the regulation, to facilitate, corporate compliance across borders, to increase capacity for the host countries to engage and promote in high integrity carbon market activities, to continue clearly communicating that we need the public support for high integrity VCNs at high level, and applauding the corporate participation and the efforts that the corporates are making. And lastly, of course, for the policy development to really, I know I'm reiterating it, but for policy development to really integrate the claims code and ICVCM criteria into their processes.
Thank you, Anton.
If I may add, so I really think that sort of riffing off the sentiment of the previous comment that Robin tackled, I think there is a lot of complexity in this world, in the carbon market space, and specifically both in the VCM world and in the Article 6 world. And as they are converging, I think there is, risk of the complexities multiplying by each other. And I think it's really important for institutions like A6IP and their partners to really bring common understandings, common frameworks to market participants, and to help governments and the private sector better understand how do we get to integrity by the use of common thresholds, common frameworks, common understandings, and packaging that into understandable formats and capacity development programs to help governments make use of this world and make use of these resources to attract private finance to climate mitigation.
One, I can also step in from my experience wearing the head of the investor. It's pretty impressive how their resources inside of investment vehicles are limited in terms of really answering these very specific questions around what you said earlier, Christy, the difference between letter of authorization and the corresponding adjustment. I'm lucky. I worked at the UN. I was part of the Paris Agreement negotiations. So I have the background, but talking to colleagues in the investment sector, it's so complex. There's so many layers of complexity in it that I'm personally concerned that investment is freezing up, because rather than creating a supportive policy landscape, it's becoming another risk in the investment equation. And I think that's where possibly the partnership can help to build capacity for investors to make this complex landscape more understandable and be able to assess risk for transactions under jurisdictions, under specific standards or methodologies. So I think just acknowledging that there's a lot of a huge lack of capacity within the investment community to understand the complexity, which is imminent, and for us to keep driving investments. And yeah, that's, I think, a nice space where you can play.
Yeah, going last, most of what I was going to say, people have already said, so I will not reiterate. But I really feel like this partnership is going to be essential. Having these kinds of forums where people with different lenses can share their experiences with the different things, I think is so important. As was mentioned, there are nuances to a lot of this. They don't play out in a forward soundbite very often, either correctly or well. So it is really important to understand the deeper issues. I do think that the private sector has a tremendous role in showing a demand signal for high integrity and for things that are Paris aligned. If there is a demand signal, governments or project scaler or whichever one you're looking at, I will move towards that, right? So if we want high integrity, it's important to have that demand signal, but it's also important to realize that costs money too. So, saying you want that, but offering $1 a ton is, a bit of a challenge. So I think the private sector can really show that they recognize and appreciate high quality through some of these programs. And then I also think that, as all of us interact with the UN negotiators, there's some here, or, that have those connections, just again, explaining where we are and where we're going and what all these different pieces already have and, where we can improve things, but where we shouldn't just start over. And really show how all these things are aligning and can be used to across the board. I think that'll get to some of the requests for simplicity, right? If we no longer have, well, the voluntary market's over here, and here's the rules around that, and here's what's good in the voluntary market, here's the compliance market, here's what's good there. These are the different levels there. But now if you want to look at other claims, here's, if we can get to the point where it's seen that these are merging, I think that'll, it's not going to solve, it won't ever be simple, don't get me wrong, but it'll get us moving in that direction. So I look forward to ARD and other groups participating in this partnership, because I think these conversations are going to be essential in helping us all move towards that common objective.
Thank you, Christy. So it was a very interesting discussion. Thank you to all the panelists. I think we had overviews of some of the key initiatives to promote high integrity in voluntary carbon markets. We learned how they will apply to Article 6 markets going forward. And also we heard about first-hand experiences in the emerging Article 6 market from credit mechanism and standards, and from project developers and developer and investor. We heard about different models. The Article 6 is a set of diverse cooperative approaches. That's the nature of Article 6, and it can be leveraged to its advantage. But we also discussed the complexity that this emerging space displays, and what can be done to live with this complexity and ensure that beyond our little bubble of Article 6 experts, things are workable. We can attract interest from the private sector, from private capital, beyond the little niche of carbon market experts and specialists. So this is expected to be the first of a series of discussions, and something that will plant the seeds for further conversations and partnerships. So thank you again to the 5 panelists for your time, for your precious insights. And thank you to all the attendees for their attention and their interesting questions. I'll hand back to Nakamura-san for the next stage of this webinar. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, our panel moderator and distinguished panelists. So now, it's the concluding session towards collective actions. We'd like to discuss the future arrangement of this A6IP private sector working group. And there's also various comments on the work for the partnership, and also various remaining questions more. So I believe that Director Kazu might would like to answer some of the questions sometimes or comments. So that I would like to hand over to the floor first to the Director Kazu Kwakutsu, Director of A6IP. The floor is yours.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Actually, I was also going to jump in the panel, but maybe very much very encouraged and also happy to hear all the very valuable comments and sharing your experiences. So I do really believe that I think at this point really kind of put actual project ongoing and also some best practices to happen so that we can see how we know how it works, and then we understand how it works. So I think from our point of view, we really wanted to through Article 6 Implement Partnership to try to bring more partnership and then create some tangible projects, some piloting, testing, involvement of more companies, more government to really make things happen. So I do really appreciate the Christy to share actually experience. I think I really encourage that, even with this current existing rules, it can be done. Of course, it'll be great if we have more clarity, but I think the important point is we can actually still can be done with the current existing rules. So, and also maybe, of course, we can kind of reflect what has been going. And then I think that really moves discussion in the UN side to be also going. And also appreciate the Svenja from Base Carbon to also share your experience in actual engagement in transactions and also all these the negotiation or bilateral arrangement. So just reflection, or at least from my end, in terms of how at least I see some of the area where this working group could kind of touch upon as we move on. And of course, happy to please share your comments and also leave in this comment for us to further consider. But at least I have 3 or 4 areas which I think we can meaningfully contribute in this context. First one is particularly it'll be useful to maybe looking at the methodology and some of the experience that this high integrity methodology could work. Because Anton, ICBCM also mentioned about this CCP eligible will be based on the CCP methodology. And also I see that many private sector, when we are communicating, they're also questioning around the methodologies, what kind of methodologies are also eligible, what kind of, how those methodologies could be developed, and so on. So I think understanding those methodological area, knowing that this principle of high integrity carbon talks about not just only corresponding adjustment, and also for the principle, the corresponding adjustment is not only the necessary point. I think, of course, that could be, if it's used towards NDC or used CORSIA, of course, the, Paris Article 6 rules will be applied. But when we are talking about net zero by 2050, many companies also voluntarily mention towards their net zero emission by company supply chain. And maybe even the individuals may say, they wanted to net zero. And so those are different from NDC. Those are different from, CORSIA. So we need to really accommodate those different net zero target and how they can achieve towards that target and how this kind of credit could be contributing towards net zero. At least the principle recognize that those different net zero target will be fulfilled. So from that context, I think we also talk about what is the baseline ambitious baseline, what is additionality, what is the permanence, what is the leakage, and also this the principle also talks about, you know, we can learn from emerging experiences, also best practices from existing independent standards such as ArcGIS or Vera. And also we are ongoing discussions around 6.4 mechanisms. So I think that's kind of a, you know, we could really dive into the methodological area, which hopefully could bring more understandable manner for the private sector when it comes to judging which kind of credit they are choosing, which kind of projects, and what is, and ensuring the environmental integrity or high carbon in high integrity side. So one area, I think, again, this is just my current collections. I think the discussion around methodologies and high integrity methodology, what that means, and so on, will be really helpful. Another point is I also heard many from many distinguished panelists around, you know, we need more transparency. Svenja also mentioned, like, you know, since this is you know, over the bilateral, and then not much information about the price and how to address risks, and then how the corresponding adjustment works, etc. I think we really need to have a more kind of accessible information, then how we can bring those information together in a way to provide a more informed, transparent decision for, or maybe investors and, you know, those corporate as well as government to really work. So yeah, including the carbon price, and we also are talking with the CAD Trust, which also providing more detailed information. We are also talking with some of the rating agencies. So I think it'll be really, you know, we can think about how we can bring those information together to really inform decisions for the investors, for the companies, for those who are involved in this. So that's another area. Hopefully that also provide more robust or simple for the companies to understood. The another area which I also see kind of an emerging area is there was also questions or mentioning about the legal nature of carbon credit or carbon market aspects. I think those are the things that I think are emerging. So we are talking about like a contract and what is the kind of overseeing this, and there is some securities issues or protection of the investors, and what happens, there is a dispute and etc. I think those are also things that the company are very much kind of concerned about when it comes to the trading of the units, trading the credit. So I think this area, maybe again, maybe we can discuss with AITA and then as our thinking, but those kind of legal nature of the carbon credit is also this area where we can also think about, and then providing more organized information, and also kind of providing some of the good practices or some of the tools that could be used, etc. So broadly, I think those are the area that I see there is also the things that we could do. But also working with BCMI, for example, we also like to see how the company can also use this claims code. We are also thinking to like working with BCMI to really help companies or governments to use this code. But at the same time, maybe when we are talking about this claim code, there is also the different kind of reporting. I think Biaka, you mentioned like CDP, and there's also TCFD, and there's many other SBTI and etc. So I think there's many different reporting that companies are also complying. So how the kind of alignment, and then how the distinction, and then so on. So I think those areas, when it comes to the reporting by the company, I think those are the area which I also see is really important to look into. So all of this is really try to facilitate the more involvement of these stakeholders in this regard. So we are currently thinking next working group, maybe we could organize towards the maybe before summer break or after summer break, depending on how much we can prepare and progress. But hopefully we will be in touch. And again, this is a really important area which we need to progress. So try to provide our discussion space to really move things forward. So that's my reflection, and back to Nakamura-san.
Thank you very much, Director Kazu. Even say summer break, but we connected with all over the world. And so that you have a summer from now here in Japan, but for others, so there will be winter also, but around probably August or September, probably. But anyway, so that we will happy to announce later on for further matter, so that your comments or whatever will be very, very appreciated. But meanwhile, so that I would like to also request some comments. If you have from Ayeta, Andrea, otherwise, Mion, do you have any comments?
Thank you, Nakamura-san. I wasn't expecting to provide final comments now, but well, I thank you, Aegis, again for launching this initiative. It's great to be your partner on this. I think as the discussion and the questions for the attendee have shown, there's need for initiatives like this. I believe this initiative and these meetings should be the beginning of a process, the beginning of more discussions between market participants, between the market and the public sector, all the institutions involved in Article 6. Eventually, we need things to move forward. We need things to be implemented with high integrity, but we need to move from rule making to action, to investment. So we want to contribute to this, and we're very grateful to be part of this partnership with you. And thank you again, and thank you to the audience for their time.
Thank you very much. Some of the remaining questions or document comments, so that it will be recorded, so that it will not be in vain. And when you close this session, so that the question form or feedback form will be popped up to your the screen. So they are grateful if you can make some comments. And for the purpose of the partners who cannot join this live session, A6IP Center will also share the link of the form together with the link of the records for all the partners. So that I would like to request that all the partners can fill in the form, so that we can reflect your view for this private sector partner working group of the A6IP. So with that, so that I would like to request the final words from Director Kazu to conclude the session.
Yeah, thank you, Nakamura-san. And also, again, let me also thank all the distinguished panel member to join this first private sector working group, and also my big thanks to our colleagues from AITA to organize this. And yes, this is the first time, and I think this really great start with the sharing of all the initiatives and actual projects on the ground. And we set the scene. So maybe with the comments from today, we will consider next agenda item. But next time, I think we will be more focused on some of the topics and try to discuss more detail. And also at the same time, we think we'll try to think how we can facilitate in connecting different partners. And also the objective is really to bring actual projects and actual actions on the ground to happen. So for that purpose, I really looking forward to working all of you together. Today we have a very good representative of private sector, government, and all the research institution, NGOs to join. So really hope to continue this engagement. Yeah, so thank you so much for today and looking forward to working together.
Thank you very much. With this, I would like to conclude today's session. Thank you again for your kind participation and looking forward to seeing you in for the next opportunity in the future. Grateful if you kindly stay connected with A6IP. Have a good rest of your day and bye-bye.